Hello, everybody, and welcome. Julie Aranis and I are going to set the stage for today's Credential As You Go's first summit of what will be a series of discussions in the next couple of years on language used in the credentialing space. Many of these concepts and terms that you saw in the materials we sent in advance are new to the field, and they really don't have established definitions. And many are trending terms not well understood, and others are used in different ways depending on stakeholder perspectives and contexts. Today, we're going to hear multiple perspectives on three key concept and terminology terms that seem to be raising the most issues and tensions right now. After our three panel, we'll try to summarize some of the key challenges and next steps. Given our limited time today, we're not able to open the floor for a plenary discussion, but we encourage you to add perspectives in the chat so that we can capture some of your thinking. And this will be recorded as well. Well, I'm personally beginning to feel like we're in a game show. To make my point, let's play a quick game of Education Jeopardy.
Here's our board, and let's pick credential names for 200. The clue is micro-credentials, non-degree credentials, micro-pathway, and certificate. Our contestants are ringing in, and one of them has the correct answer. What do you call a short-term credential that is not a college degree? There's not just one answer to our question. There are more and more names that may mean the same or almost the same thing. Are we all about synonyming these days? That's a new word I've coined. As we develop new credentials, making up words for things, synonyms, that mean close to the same thing. This is causing confusion in the learn and work ecosystem, and this is what we're here to consider today. The ecosystem is especially notable right now because of all the innovations going on that so many of you are directly involved in. My words for this context are trains of innovation, the thousands of trains of innovation that are burning track across the nation. Two of them are our trains. There's Credential As You Go, with its destination to build an incremental credentialing system in the US, in which all learners are recognized for what they know and can do as they acquire learning from multiple sources. And there's the Digital Learn and Work Ecosystem Library, with a destination to inform folks about the Learn and Work ecosystem. To support Credential As You Go and the many other efforts working to improve our Learn and Work ecosystem, we're working with several partners to develop the library. To date, we've established a national advisory board to guide this work. We also drafted a list of key definitions, concepts, and use of terms because of the growing confusion about them. We hope you've had a chance to look through this and the list of terms included so far that are really just related to incremental credentialing. That's the bite we are trying to pull off first. And we're really welcoming feedback on ways to improve it. The next version, for example, will have live links to each of the definitions that we pulled in. Well, in pulling together definitions, we set up some criteria for collecting and selecting terms in the search process. And I'm not going to read these, but the main aim really was to try to capture diverse and nuanced voices from employers, research reports, college and university websites, media articles and blogs, and dictionaries and glossaries. So what we have in our working draft are 73 terms that fall within 42 term areas and 168 entries. They come from 61 different organizations or individuals, and 9 organizations, which seems pretty interesting to me, are accounting for 44% of the entries. You might actually look at, and these are portrayed in rank order. You might look at this group of 9 as being very influential and playing a main role in defining the key terms that are related to incremental credentialing or non-degree credentials. So with this as some of the context, I'd like to turn the next portion of our setting the stage to Julie Aranis, Vice President for Online and Strategic Initiatives at the University Professional and Continuing Education Association, or UPCEA. Easier to say that, Julie. She's also a member of the Credential As You Go Advisory Board and a member of the Learn and Work Ecosystem Library. So Julie, take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Friends, I was so pleased and honored to be asked to kick off today's summit. I care deeply about this work, and I also represent institutions that are engaged in these efforts. So this is a lovely opportunity to share some of those discussions that are happening in post-secondary ed and namely occurring in professional and continuing education units at colleges and universities. So you may or may not know this, but APSEA members have been engaged in incremental alternative and non-degree credentials, noting a lack of a universal term here, since its very inception. APSEA is pretty old. We've been around since 1915, and we were born out of the correspondence education movement as well as the extension education movements at universities. So you can see a pretty straight line for us from our founding days to our focus today, which is largely on online learning and non-degree or alternative credentials. So I'd like to begin by sharing some of the work our members are doing with regard to incremental credentials and how we're trying to elevate that work. I've got some linked resources here. I'm assuming this PowerPoint will be available later, but I wanted to draw your attention to a few things. The first two resources here are research studies that we conducted with our partners, Modern Campus and MindEdge. So our Center for Research and Strategy is engaged in the non-degree credential research network, another acronym. As a matter of fact, Jim Fong from our research center received a research contract from NCRN to study employers' attitudes towards non-degree credentials. So we have 3 hallmark documents. We don't like to call them standards or frameworks because of the highly contextual nature of this work. No 2 member organizations within APSEA have the same portfolio or the same resources. So we like to consider our hallmark documents as aspirational and allowing institutions to draw from them what they will, and kind of using them as guiding documents. We have 2 institutional-led bodies within APSEA, a network and a council. The network supports members that are charged with the operational aspects of non-degree credentials at their institutions, allowing them to collaborate and share emerging and good practices. Whereas the Council for Credential Innovation is more outward-facing, focused on thought leadership and elevating models, important research, and other ways to impact the space. So you'll notice that nested underneath our council, we have 3 subcommittees, and the last subcommittee is focused on typology, terminology, and standards. So if you're keeping score at home, this is the work of this last committee is where we see overlaps with other organizations, like the great work being done in Credential As You Go. So early on, our council said, let's not create more work for ourselves. Let's look at what's out there. So I shared with them the definitions that you all saw that Holly's been curating, as well as our good friends at WorkCred, their document on certificates, certifications, degrees, and licenses. So just as we're seeing nuances in the variety of definitions as Holly's kind of surfaced, APSEA's council observed that it might not be the best time to try and lock in a set definition on particular terms. Perhaps the curating of definitions, and curating means not only additive, but also dismissing definitions that don't align with common thought or practices. So this is the space that we're considering. We're trying to bring clarity and support particular terms and attributes without creating one particular definition for a term, just for now, okay? And this nuance approach is, we think that it's important in this nascent area. So if you've attended any session from Jim Fong at APSEA, you've probably seen this graphic. This is actually one of APSEA's recommendations to our member institutions, is that they consider a continuum of credentials and creating order and sense making for their institution. So no institution is an island, but creating order for one institution using concepts and terms that are meaningful and generally accepted gets us further along this pathway towards more universal definitions. The key here is transparency. You can really call these things anything you want, as long as you define it and you put it in context. So for now, and back to Holly's earlier point, what you call a short-term non-degree credential, whether it's a micro-credential, a badge, or certificate, well, that's important, but not as important as declaring it as a short-term non-degree credential and describing it as such, because that allows all of us to do some crosswalking just for now to know that we're talking about the same things from the institutional sense, and then articulating that and making it available to learners and making it available to employers is important. So what I want to leave you with is one example of an institution doing this. This is Stanford. If you look at their School of Continuing and Professional Development, they have this graphic right on their main website. So you'll notice that they share the degree of rigor for their credentials, the validation of learning, and where credit and non-credit begins and ends. So now I think, Holly, I've teed up the idea of pathways and these, this continuum of credentials. So I think it might be time to introduce our first panel. What do you think?
It is, and thanks, Julie. And we have one last slide. It's our new cartoon drawn by Chloe Epstein, who's in the audience with us today, and is Credential As You Go's first artist in residence. We actually think these issues are so difficult to understand that is when you have to bring in cartoons. So we're going to have a gallery of cartoons eventually at our website for Credential As You Go, and we hope that many of you will use these in meetings you have with faculty and others. So feel free to contact us and use the art that's going to be coming forward. So let's jump into the game show.
We encourage you to visit our website, www.credentialasYouGo.org. The site is under development, so be sure to return often and capture updates. Thank you.